Hello friends, it is 2025, which means that 2024 was a great year. It's over and we have so many books to talk about. I have 24 of my best books of 2024. So without further ado, let's get into it. To apologize. I have been off of YouTube for almost a month and I feel like this is a constant thing I have to apologize for, but I have been so busy with the holidays, and then my family got very sick over Christmas. We were sick for a very long time. Then my kids got sick, and it has just been a very busy season, and I have not been able to edit and post and film as much as I would like to. So I'm so glad that I got this opportunity where nobody was in the house today, thank goodness, and I was able to actually film a video. But I'm so excited to share with you some of my favorite books. I am going to start this list from my, I would say, obviously I don't have a least favorite because these are my top 24 books, but from like least to greatest impact of how I scored it, but also how it made me feel. An excitement level and just being so pumped to tell people about it and all of that. So I have my list right here. It's on a piece of paper. It's nothing fancy, but I'm excited to go over them with you. And so we're going to start from our countdown of 24, and here we go. I would also like to note that I am still currently doing a giveaway on my YouTube. It has been slow moving, but when I get to 700 followers, I am going to be doing a prize to where you get $30 of books off of your wish list. So yes, hit the subscribe button and that would be so helpful for me. Also, I am not going to be doing any more wrap-ups for the year 2024. It literally got away from me and I have to do a wrap-up for like October, November, December, January, and I feel like in lieu of a wrap-up, my top 24 books will reflect what I was most excited about anyway, so you're going to get the content that you want in more of a nutshell form. The first book on my list would be One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. I did have a copy of this in physical form, but I did gift it to a friend for a giveaway. I love Ruth Ware's books when they are very atmospheric. There are some of her books that kind of fall flat for me. I kind of feel like the books that fall flat for me are more character driven with her, and if it is more plot driven, I like it. But One Perfect Couple did not disappoint. It was, in my opinion, a plot driven book. Basically people who were kind of like new in a relationship ended up going on to this show. It was a reality show that was going to test basically the integrity of their relationship, going through different obstacles and kind of like, Love is Blind or whatever. They do all these different games to kind of test out or weed out how compatible you are. And then later on in the game, inevitably, you get switched around with other couples, partners. And the whole idea of it was great. And the girl who goes on the show is so excited to get famous, but her boyfriend bails, things go very wrong, and she ends up in a basically marooned situation on an island. And it is very intense, very fast paced, and it did not disappoint, and it is on my top 24 as the number 24 spot. All right, the next book that I loved, and I put this kind of lower on the list, which surprised me too, but the reason I put it lower is because I read so many great books that kind of categorizing them and comparing over the year, I felt like Happy Place came in at number 23. So Happy Place by Emily Henry, who I absolutely adore. I think she is a great, prolific writer, but this book was so good. It was not, a lot of people got mad because the name is Happy Place, but it's kind of a dark and depressing book. It is a book about kind of grieving the life that you want to have, but you don't have, and kind of finding your way back to yourself. And she's on a journey with some friends of hers. They come back to like a beach house, one of their friends' beach homes, and that friend is now getting married, and they're kind of all coming to terms with their life. And she's getting kind of, what is the Taylor Swift verse in Love of My Life? Who's going to stop us from dancing back into rekindled flames? That's kind of what the entire book is about like looking back and seeing, if I rekindle this, will it burn bright, just as bright as it did, this relationship, or will it fall flat? But I thought it was a great book. It is a challenging read because it is emotional, but is so worth your time. All right, the next book coming in at 22 was Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. I thought this book was so adorable. I fell in love with it more than I thought I would, to be honest with you. It just had such a great story about coming of age. This girl is going through the grief and loss of her mother. She's trying to find her footing in being a teenager and being in high school and falling in love for the first time. And she's also kind of in this almost like retaliation situation where she has a boy she likes, but she's trying to get him by means of using another boy. And it becomes kind of a blown up dynamic love triangle that ends up just being so entertaining, but also so deep and meaningful and sweet. So I think you will really love this book. If you like kind of love triangle situations, if you love, young blood, you will definitely like this book. And I think Lynn Painter is a great writer. It is no surprise that there is going to be a lot of Sarah Adams on this list because I absolutely love Sarah Adams. I have her new book, Beg, Borrow, and Steal. I have not completed it yet, but I'm so excited to. But she scores the 21 spot with the rule book. I loved this book, but not as much as some of the others. But I thought that the banter between the two characters, the love interest, was so good. Basically, she is a sports PR person, and she ends up by happenstance with her old flame representing him as a PR representative, and you can imagine how that could explode in your face. But through a series of so many different events, they try to find their groove, and can they be friends? Will they, won't they? There's so much tension, and it's such a great book. You will love it. It is definitely a second chance romance and one worth waiting for. All right, number 20 would be Quicksilver by Callie Hart. I actually just finished this book a couple of weeks ago. It ended up being so much better than I imagined. I was expecting it to be kind of like dark and dredgy, but it ended up being so full of romance and sweetness and like meaning and purpose. So basically this girl, she finds that she has a special unique gift where she can manipulate a type of alloy that is very important to all kinds of different things, whether it be teleportation or going into different realms, using it for power in swords and different things like that. She feels that she can kind of talk to this alloy, which is very interesting. So it is such a great book about like someone finding their place, finding their purpose, and also along the way, she meets someone that you would never expect her to fall for or even consider. And there is such a kind of like enemies or rivals to lovers maybe kind of baking in this whole book, and it is a slow burn pretty much because I felt like it was quite a while before things got happening, but I loved it. I thought it was really good, well structured, very enticing, very fast paced from the get-go. Like you are just diving in super fast, and I'm very excited. I think it's going to be a great book for you. Not to mention Kingfisher ain't bad to look at. At least just the way he's described in the book. I like kept imagining him and I was like, oh. Number 19 is Adeline Grace's Belladonna. I absolutely loved this book and someone is borrowing it currently, but that was the moment I found out that I am obsessed with Gothic fantasy, or more specifically, Gothic romantasy. The book was basically about someone falling in love with death and a special gift that you have to kind of be empathetic towards death personified, and kind of how that you would navigate that, and how death himself would use that special gift for and against you. So it was like really good vibes, good atmosphere, very regal kind of. It felt like a regal Gothic fantasy, like you're imagining Bridgerton, but like with lots of plagues and weird spiritual beings and spiritual atmospheres. But it was such a great read and I absolutely loved it, and I think you will love it. Definitely give it a go. I know it has a lot of hype, but I do feel like it lives up to the hype. So definitely check it out. Coming in at number 18 is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. I loved this book. It was very sweet. I gave it 4 stars. I loved that it was Regency romance, and I think I said regal about the other romance, but it's Regency. It's Regency romance. It has so many colorful characters. Lord Sorcier, specifically in this book, is like an older recluse type gentleman who everybody kind of doesn't like, but he's so intelligent and speaks his mind and is very brash. and you kind of just start to love him throughout the book. The main character has gone through kind of a trauma in her life that has led up to having kind of special abilities that no one knows about but her. And so they kind of work together to find that she's meant for more. Lord Sorcier and this lady, I can't remember her name, isn't that sad? But they work together to find out that there's more to her purpose than meets the eye. And she's kind of like his only rival, the only person who will stand up to him, the only person who will challenge him. So it's just giving friends to lovers, kind of, because at first, I wouldn't say enemies to lovers, they're more friends to lovers. They turn out as friends, they're working together for a common goal, and then some things happen to where things get really serious and kind of like accelerated, and they start to see each other in a new way. Coming in at number 17 is Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. This book was breathtaking. Honestly, I feel so emotionally involved with this book because it was about domestic abuse. And I just feel like I have heard so many stories, whether, personal or people I don't know, on this topic. And it just really pulled me in, and it made it personal for me because I felt like I was in the room trying to help them. Like I was there. She really paints you into the family. You feel like you are a fly on the wall, and you want to just scream at them, do this, do that, get out, run, all these things. And it's just, there's a lot to the book. I would say this book, longest book that I read this year because it was over 800 pages, but there's so much emotional meat to this book. And I felt like it was so deep and complex because it's showing how someone can go through trauma and then learn to love again, and the stages that might take, and also just the stages of how abuse can affect you in every single way of your emotional being. So it was definitely a great read, and I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it. I actually have this book coming in at number 16, The Storied Life of AJ Figy, and I think I actually embossed this book because I'm going to keep it, but this is by Gabrielle Zevin. I thought this book was masterful. It is so emotional. I cried reading the book, but also watching the movie with Lucy Hale. I believe it's on Hulu. Such a moving masterpiece, the book and the movie. And I just thought it was so great. It's about a reclusive bookshop keeper who is content to just live his life in the shadows until he meets someone that pulls him out of the shadows and causes him to embrace life in a whole new way. One day he is walking through his shop and he finds someone has left a baby. And this reclusive, widowed man who is an alcoholic and going through a lot at the time finds that this life form pulls him out of the water when he's drowning. And so he becomes a father in the ways that he can figure it out. And it's such a beautiful story to see kind of where his journey takes him. So this is a wonderful book. I would consider it like adult fiction, literary fiction. So definitely go in knowing that is going to be more of a serious read, but it's definitely worth your time, and I consider this just one of the best. So check it out. Coming in at number 15 is a favorite author, and that is Riley Sager's Survive the Night. And what's even more special is I did get this signed with a letter plate and stamped by Jason Rekuluk because he was also there with his book Hidden Pictures. But I went on a trip with my best friend, Wendy, and we were able to see him, meet him, and get signatures of his book, his new book, Middle of the Night, and get him to sign some of our old books. Survive the Night for me was one of my favorites because it delves into kind of how something could be psychologically torturing. So in this book, basically nothing is as it seems. And I think the scariest thing in the world would be to not psychologically be able to perceive when you're being trapped or you're being manipulated or abused or you're being coerced in some way. And so this book definitely gets to the nitty-gritty. Basically, this girl decides to get a ride home from a random college student that she's never met. And as you can imagine, that was a bad idea. And a lot of bad things begin happening. She begins getting kind of in a bad, trapped situation. And it has a lot of nods to Alfred Hitchcock, which I absolutely love. And the book, the ending is different for everybody because there's an element to the book you don't realize until the very end. And you are like jaw on the ground, shocked. So definitely a must read, 5 stars all day long. It's a psychological thriller. So definitely check it out. One of my biggest surprises this year was this next book that I'm going to talk about. And this is coming in at number 14. I had written this author off completely. I felt like everything she wrote was kind of mid for me and I didn't love it. But when I read this book, I took it all back because I have found that she is very clever, and I have been listening to some of her other books and reading some of her other books and just really enjoying the ride. But this is Frida McFadden's The Boyfriend. This book surprised me. Let me tell you, it is so unpredictable. You will not be able to predict the ending, which was so great for me. I literally didn't know what was happening the whole time. I was like, oh my gosh, it's him, it's her, it's him, it's her, it's them, it's both of them, it's everyone. And you're just so confused. It follows a boy who falls in love with a girl. Both of them have some traumatic things in their life, and the events that take place due to that trauma leads them to a life of hiding something very important, and manipulating and taking advantage of and abusing other people. And when you get down to it, you're just blown away. This book will make you rethink everything, and I absolutely love how it gives you such great insight onto how really bad people can hide in plain sight. So I absolutely love it. It is a must read. Check it out. This book that I'm going to talk about is very emotional, The Silent Woods, and I can't remember the author's name, but I think it's like Kim Cunningham, but I'm going to put it up here. The Silent Woods was such a herald to fatherhood, but also just such a personally triumphant book of how you can take the high ground on something that is so deeply wrong. And this book basically talks about, if I could put one word on this book, it would be self-sacrifice, because this guy is basically self-sacrificing to raise this daughter in secrecy, hidden away so he can keep her. It is his real biological daughter, but there have been so many legal issues and they're off the grid. So essentially he kind of, I mean, it's his kid, but essentially she's kind of kidnapped, I guess. And you kind of see how this whole thing plays out. And it is just mind-boggling, but it's also, when it gets to the end, there is a moral, like, epiphany that you have as a Christian that just blows your mind. So definitely check out this book. It is absolutely worth the read. And I felt very emotional at the end, did cry, was moved to tears, and just felt so grateful. So definitely a great book to check out. I'm very good recently about getting my books in and out after I read them. So I no longer have Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole, but I did actually have the special edition book from my great friend Gwen, who gave it to me during a giveaway, and I was able to sell it for like over $50 because it was a special cover when they did the remake. So that was pretty fun and exciting. But this book was such an epic fantasy. I can't even describe it. So this girl, once again, it's a girl who has such a deep destiny, and you don't know, and she doesn't know, and it's following her life, and there are certain things, powers that are subtle, but she has them, and they begin to present in different areas of her life, and she begins to see this bigger picture forming, that maybe she has a different identity than she really thought. Maybe there is more to her than meets the eye. But she's kind of like wasting time trapped in this dull relationship, and she's trying to figure out and navigate that too. And then she meets someone who should be her absolute arch nemesis enemy, but she begins to get kind of worn down by him. And this book is definitely enemies to lovers, and it is just superb. I 5-starred it. I thought the writing was very rich and descriptive and prolific and great. And I'm excited to get in more of the series. I haven't finished the series, so I'm really excited to go on. But I read this. I didn't listen. I read this eyeball reading on my Kindle, and I just found this book to be so incredible. So definitely check it out and check out the entire series. Many of my friends loved this book. And at number, and I didn't say this, but Spark of the Everflame was number 12. Number 11 is Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. Need I say more? Fantasy. It's about Selena Sardothian. You find out a major bombshell at the very end of the book, and you were just overwhelmed and blown away. And it is just the best book as far as the pace goes. I felt like just it was very well paced. I was very involved. There is a love triangle, so there's a lot of elements that are exciting and interesting, and I just felt like this was one of her best in the series so far that I've read. So I'm super excited to keep continuing. I did finish Heir of Fire, and I need to finish on from there, but Crown of Midnight definitely holds a high place on my list because I thought it was so good. So number 11, Crown of Midnight, it was so good. Coming in at number 10 is The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. I read this book while on vacation in April. We went to Lake Michigan with my family, and this book just engrossed me the whole time. I kind of felt like I was like more engrossed in this book than our vacation because I just couldn't wait to get back and read. Don't get me wrong. It is a heavy, heavy, heavy read. You will be depressed, but then you will see the light at the end of the tunnel. It was very heavy for me, but at the time I was really dealing with grief after losing my dad, and it was just like sometimes you need to wallow in sadness and heaviness, and so I did that with this book. And it was really, really good. Kristen Hanna has such a gift of writing really like strong, powerful, invoking characters. What's the word I'm looking for? They stand up for injustice. So she finds a lot of underdog type characters, or she writes a lot of them, to where they have disadvantages, whether it be family not treating them well or bad relationships or whatever, or like anything. And then they become an underdog that like rises to the top and just shines and has such a big purpose. And this book was definitely that. There's also an idea of like martyrdom in this book. Someone is a martyr in a way. And so it is just so moving and powerful. And I would say it's one of the best books of our time. It's definitely worth the read. So definitely check it out. All right. I needed a drink. I was getting pretty overwhelmed with the amount of talking that I had to do. The next book coming in at number 9 is The ROM Commers, and this is by Catherine Center, which, speaking of, I have her bookmark right here that I got from her when she sent them out to all of the people who loved her book. And this book was so sensational, probably one of the best endings to a book as far as just how big and theatrical and cinematic it was. You just felt like it kind of felt like the scene in The Greatest Showman where the girl is singing, never enough, never, never. It's like big like that. Like you're like moved emotionally. So I would say that like read to the end. It's about two people who are thrown together to write a script for a rom-com, a sci-fi screenwriter with a girl who writes romantic comedy type material, and she's trying to kind of like branch out into new things. So she gets paired with this already famous writer, and he's a child. He is very immature. He kind of reminds me of the movie 2 Weeks Notice with Sandra Bullock. That kind of relationship with someone who is just very insincere, selfish, self-centered, just all the things. So she has to kind of navigate that and try to find out how to work with him. And along the way, she realizes that there's more to him than meets the eye. And she begins to kind of crack away at his layers and find someone who is genuinely amazing. But getting to that point is just such a wild ride. So you definitely buckle up. It is such a great book. You are not going to be disappointed, and you're going to laugh. You're going to laugh so much because it lives up to its name. It is a rom-com. It is a rom comedy, and you are going to just love it. Next book I also have, and also embossed with my new embosser that says From the Library of Leah Beth Young. This is Ready or Not by Cara Baston, or Baston. I think it's Baston. This book, number one of my favorite covers of the entire year, and nothing has beat it. I actually said in my mid-year freakout tag that this was one of my favorite covers, and I mean, it's still kind of my favorite. I just feel like it's so sweet. And let me just get up closer so you can really see it because it wasn't focusing. It's so springtastic. I love it so much. This book is character driven. Pretty much what I fell in love with was this girl's inner monologue. She is so great. I want to make sure her name was Eve. Yes. Eve Hatch is like the most amazing female character. Her inner monologue had me cackling. It was so funny. Now, I tandem read this with audio. The audio is superb. Superb. It is so funny. You will find yourself just dying. The things that you like, okay, New Girl. If you are a fan of New Girl, you will find that Jess and her share a lot of similarities as well. So I would say like it was just so much reminding me of New Girl and so sweet. You are going to love it. The next book is such a favorite, The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams, and this comes in at number 7. I loved this book so much. The main character, Brie Cheese, she is a ballerina. She is, working with disadvantaged youth in a local inner city. And she once has this huge dream to have her own studio. She has a best friend who is a pro football guy and has been secretly in love with her forever. And they have always kept their relationship so platonic and kind of like a brother-sister relationship. And so I would say that this is friends to lovers, but it's also just like a brother type situation, kind of like Clueless. You know how he's like a brother type? He's her stepbrother, but not really, because they're divorced in the movie. But he ends up falling for her, just like in Clueless. So this is kind of just like a nod to Clueless in a way. It's got like a character that's a little clueless and then a love interest to where it's like a brother type. And it is so amazing. It reminds me of a Taylor Swift song, Call It What You Want To, when she said, making forts undercovers, trust you like a brother. Yeah, I know I did one thing right. That's literally what this whole book is. It could be that song, Call It What You Want To, because they don't know how they're feeling and it's a will they, won't they kind of situation. And he does something at the end that just, the gesture of love is so spectacular. Don't let people tell you it's not a good book. It is sweet, whimsical, romantic, and you will love it. This next book comes at no surprise because everybody and their mama was talking about it, but Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez was hands down one of the best books, and it comes in at number 6. I read it during the summertime, early summertime, and it was just so great. There is a golden retriever boyfriend in this book that just surpasses everybody else. His name is Justin. And he is just adorable. For dates, he will give like exit interviews to see how you felt during the date and what could be improved and all these different things. He falls in love with a traveling nurse by happenstance. There's a really cool story to how that works out. And they're trying to make something work that literally has everything against it. All odds are against this relationship working. Whether it's her financial situation because she's a nurse and she travels, her career, whether it's her mother, her deadbeat mother who keeps following her and kind of mooching off of her in every living situation she has, and the bad emotional relationship which she has with her mother that translates into any relationship she currently has. There are so many like layers to this book. It's very much like a book that explains someone's trauma response to love they feel like they never got and never deserved. And so the way that she pushes people away from her in this book that love her is such a nod to a trauma response you might feel if you were in that situation. You felt constantly unloved and unworthy of someone. So it was very layered. She'd consulted so many different professionals for working on this book. So there's a lot of anxiety representation. There's a lot of grief representation. There's a lot of trauma bond type relationships with her mother and different things. Or there's also, what's the word? I'm trying to think of it. Avoidance attachment, I think. I guess that's how you could describe it. There's a lot of that in this book. There's just so many things. So definitely check it out. It is not what you would expect. And I also thought Abby Jimenez was over for me. And I read this book and I was like, this is golden. It was beautiful and it just made me feel golden inside. It was just so lovely. I will never stop talking about how much I love this book. It is so good. And I put it in number 5. Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. There is no measurement of joy that I experienced reading this book. It's limitless. Like, this book was so funny and sweet, and the character was just awkward enough to not make you feel uncomfortable, but to make you feel relatable to her. She was basically the shy, prim and proper girl, the youngest of all of her sisters, who was falling in love for a bad boy. And he was teaching her she's like, I'm really bad at dating. I keep getting, these people who aren't interested in me. It's really sad. And she ends up finding this guy who's teaching her how to date. He's like a bad boy, edgy boy, whatever, teaching her how to date and taking her on fake dates and all this stuff. And as you can imagine, with his tutelage, she's getting a lot better at all of these things. But the cute way that it all plays out was just, I have no words, honestly. There is like nods to like pirate smut in here, which is really funny. There is nods to gardening, I believe. She was like a gardener. Yeah, that's right. She had a flower shop. So there's a lot of nods if you like gardening and flower keeping and whatever you call it, but you're a florist. But the book itself was just so textured. It had all of the whims that you want. The funny, the sad, the sweet, the sassy, the tension, the chemistry, so much chemistry. I just love this book, and there's nothing I could say bad about it. It's a 5-star, 6-star, 1,000-star book all day long. In at number 4 will be no surprise to anybody, Expiration Dates by Rebecca Searle. She is one of my favorite authors, if not my favorite author. I have found that I absolutely love romance with magical realism, so that also puts her in the category of like Ashley Poston or Poston. I love this book. It has such a deep message. I love books that at face value, you're like, if you took it at face value, you'd be like, I don't get it, whatever. But if you look for the deeper meaning, and I think that a lot of us need to do this in books, look for the deeper meaning. The author isn't just writing a story to entertain you, but usually there's a message they're trying to get out. There is a moral that they want you to focus on. There is a relationship tendency they want you to really evaluate. Like, there's more than meets the eye. And Expiration Dates, I'm just going to read it again. Like, it's just such a great book. It goes over a girl who has been getting these slips of paper, and this is the magical realism element that will tell her how long she'll be in each relationship, until she gets a piece of paper that doesn't have an end date. And so she doesn't know what's going to happen. Like, what is going to happen with all of this? And so she's kind of wondering, who is this person going to be that ends up with her heart? I believe there's also some medical things in here that happen. There's just a lot of different elements to this book. I'm trying to remember because it's been such a long time ago, but I know that the impact it had on me was very, very beautiful and meaningful. And she ends up with this person who just is far more than you ever realized he could be. And so anyway, I loved this book. I believe there was grief aspects in this book as well. If I remember, it's been a while, but this book just left me feeling satiated and satisfied and fulfilled. So if you want a book that's going to meet your emotional needs, this is definitely a book that has pretty much everything that you want. This book has a great backstory. I got it on NetGalley last year. I fumbled around reading it forever. It took me a long time to come back to it because there was an aspect of it that was just almost like gross to me, like not hygienic. I got over it later, but I did DNF it. Like, I soft DNF'd it for a while and like sat on it, I know. Isn't that insane? But I went back to this book, and when I finished reading it, I thought to myself, what if I hadn't? What if I had left that on my NetGalley shelf and had never read it and just like let it go for a long time? And I thankfully read it before the hype came, before it was released, which I found is so unique of an experience. I read it and fell in love with it. And originally I 4-starred it, and then I talked about it so much with my friends and thought about it so much that I went back and gave it a full 5 stars. And to this day, I think that that has been my most talked about book that I have talked about continuously. But it is a cat and mouse, a witch, and a witch hunter, and a love triangle. There are so many elements to this book that are just amazing. Rune is the main character. She's coming into her own and becoming a witch, and she doesn't even know how it all works. But she's coming into her own, and she's a bit of a vigilante as well, because there are a lot of really bad things that are happening. It's almost like a dystopian type Salem where they're witch hunting, but in a major way to where they like really hurt and torture these witches. They bleed them basically, and so like it's really graphic in some parts, but the romance and this is like true enemies to lovers. Like it doesn't get any grittier than this. And there are also aspects that make it feel Regency. So there's a lot of elements to this book that make you take pause and you're like, this is so much more than I ever expected that it would be, and it really is so incredible. You will never be disappointed reading this book. You absolutely have to check it out. And I cannot ever say this author's last name, but it's by Kristen blah, blah, blah. And she is just such a great writer. I fell in love with her book, and I'm definitely going to get Rebel Witch as well. I have it on my NetGalley, but I want to actually get both of these books in physical form. I want them both because they're going to be favorites that I want to emboss and keep in my library. So anyway, definitely check it out. This book is definitely a favorite because it's unique. It's no surprise that I have talked about like my grief journey on YouTube a lot, losing my father. Gosh, just not last year, but the year before. So it was 2023 coming into 2024. And this book hit me at the right time because I was going through a lot of like emotional pain. And this book, although it is middle grade, it moved me to tears because of the symbolism. So one thing I've noticed about children's books is authors write with like just unabandoned, like whimsicality. There are so many elements of symbolism and just like childlike wonder and childlike faith in these books. And this basically follows a girl who is the brightest girl. She shines bright personality wise, but also in this culture, there are people who are gray, who have lost their shine. They've lost their color. And she is someone who has maintained her color, basically her innocence, her purity, her happiness, her joy throughout the trials of life. And she hasn't really come against any trial that has threatened to take that. But then she loses her parents because it is a retelling of Secret Garden. And she goes through this total eclipse of the heart to where she becomes gray on the inside. And I say it all the time. It reminds me, I just say everything reminds me of the Vampire Diaries, but it does remind me of the season where, well, I'm going to spoil. Never mind. It reminds me of Vampire Diaries because there is an aspect to vampirism where you can switch off your humanity switch. And so when you do that, you become basically like a shell of yourself. And she became a shell of herself. She became gray. And so it follows her throughout her story of finding her color again. Can she reclaim that innocence? Can she reclaim that wonder, that childlike faith? Can she heal? Can she heal? And for most of the book, she's looking for the ghost of her parents. And that really touched me because I've been there. I've been through just looking for any sign that everything's going to be okay. Not looking for the ghost of my dad, but looking for the resolve to your feelings and the resolve to how your grief is going to end. And so her grief journey is what you're reading about, but it's so much more than that. And if you take the book at face value, you will miss so much. And I want to pair this book with When a Monster Calls or A Monster Calls by Patrick Neese, which has also been very impacting for me. There wasn't enough meat maybe on that book for me to mention in this top list, but if you're going through grief, that is another really great book to check out. A Monster Calls by Patrick Neese. And then this one is just fabulous. It will have you looking at your grief through a new lens. So definitely check it out. My favorite book of 2024. It is always and forever going to be My Oxford Year by Julia Whelan. I could cry. Just talking about this book makes me emotional. This book is just my personal journey. When I read this book, I was at the peak of my grief journey, and it was like I hated it. It was like the grating kind of, you have to face reality type of book. And it's so funny because it's a romance, and Julia Whelan wrote it so beautifully. There are so many nods to poetry in this book and classical literature, because she essentially, this girl moves away to Oxford University to go there for a year to kind of find her footing. She wants to study the classic literature of a certain time period. And so she begins to meet this professor who she starts, at first she hates, and then things begin to change. She begins to see him in new ways, and there's like a kind of like a teacher-student relationship, but it's college, so it's okay in this book. But like, this book talks about how love endures. This book talks about enduring love, enduring trials, enduring hardships in a relationship. And sometimes you might feel like, I'm the only one in all of my friend group, or the only one in the world who deals with this type of heaviness in my relationship. Whether it be something, emotional, or maybe it's something medical, maybe it's whatever it is, but you might feel like alone. And I was feeling very alone in grief. Like, I'm the only one dealing with grief. No one else is dealing with it. But Julia Whelan wrote this character to where she was dealing with grief. And actually, if you read the author's note, it's a mirror. Many of Julia Whelan's books are a mirror of her own life and what she was going through. And she has gone through many stages of grief, losing people. And so anyway, this book was just what I needed. Books are, the purpose of a book is to make you challenge your reality, I believe, in a lot of ways. Or to entertain you, but also to challenge your reality, to challenge your ideas, to challenge your pre-assumptions, to get inside the head of someone else, and just to really learn empathy and to reject apathy. And so I felt like this book made me a better person. It made me empathetic. It made me understand what true love is. Anyway, I don't think I could say any more about this book. I could go on forever, but this book changed me. And that's what you want. If a book doesn't move you, change you, or invoke a feeling, then it's probably not a book that you should have in your top whatever. And if you're someone like me who is like a sleeper cell type reader, to where you don't think you want to be emotional, but then when you read a book that's emotional, oh my gosh, it sticks with you. Maybe you're someone who just, you like to read for entertainment, and just the excitement of the journey is what gets you. But if you're someone who reads to gain perspective, this book is just excellent. It's excellent, okay? I can't say anything else about it. There you have it, friends. My top 24 books, my best books of 2024. I know, and I'm so confident that there are going to be many more 5-star reads, and I cannot wait for this new season of reading, 2025. It is going to be so good, and I just can't wait. So I hope that you find books that you love. I hope your books are amazing. I hope your tea is delicious. And I will see you next time, hopefully very soon, not later, for a new video. Bye, friends.